Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Mexico Open Data Dive Show. We have a lot to get into, so let's not waste any time. A couple of announcements. The first being that the DFS Tactics show for the Mexico Open will be tomorrow night, Tuesday evening at 9 p.m. instead of Wednesday. I am leaving for vacation on Wednesday morning, so I'm moving the DFS Tactics show to tomorrow night. So I will be providing all the projected ownerships, my top pivots, and fades and whatnot tomorrow evening. So make sure you change or set your reminders for tomorrow evening, 9 p.m., the DFS Tactics show. And then the second announcement is Sunday, May the 1st. Coincidentally, the day I come back from vacation, I'm going to start doing DFS baseball content. Baseball's been a passion of mine all my life. Played baseball in college, still play baseball to this day. Baseball is my true passion, so I'm looking forward to getting into that. So if you are a baseball fan or want to get into baseball DFS, make sure you tune in on Sunday. I'm not sure of the time yet, so pay attention to my social media. I will try to give up to the second information as much as I can while I am on vacation, trying to plan that Sunday. I'm pretty sure it's going to be sometime in the morning, but again, make sure you follow me on social media if you want to see the time for the first Calls DFS baseball content. So with those two announcements out of the way, let's get through the rest of the intro. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It's an amazing resource. It's simply the best tool out there. Go check them out. It is well worth your investment. The links to my social media are in the description of all three streaming sources. Hopefully Rumble is going tonight. I know YouTube and Twitch will be as usual. So give me a follow at the links in the descriptions of the videos. This is where I post my betting cards. Usually I will post some interesting research that I find throughout the week leading into the tournament. And then finally, we are live. Chat is open. Want the interaction. Have you looked at the field for the Mexico Open? Speaking of which, there is a field change that I'll get into once we start the official show. Have you looked at the course more than what we did last night in the initial research show? Who are some players that you're kind of thinking about? Are there any outright wagers that you're thinking about? Are you going to bet John Rahm at 3.5 to 1, which was really crazy to see? And then with Daniel Berger's withdrawal, it's basically all John Rahm or some very good prices elsewhere. I believe the second choice is now 20 to 1. So let me know about that in chat. So with that out of the way, let's dig into the data for the 2022 Mexico Open. And we start with Windfinder. And we start here because in the initial research show, we talked about how the wind was going to be such a major factor, or at least that is what the tournament site had mentioned. And when looking today, here's Thursday, does not appear to be a lot of wind. Hot, 93 to be exact, but not a lot of wind. And then Friday, high of 100 or close to it. Saturday, high of 97. Sunday, it cools off to 91, but no wind, no rain. So I'm not sure how much wind is going to be a factor. At least based on this, this forecast. So as of right now, all I can do is go by this forecast. I'm not going to have any wind factored into any of the stats that I look into. Not any in the kind of direction of how I want to look at the course, especially since I don't know how the wind would affect, say, a shot on hole 2 versus hole 14 and all that stuff. I just wouldn't know. So bringing this up first to show you that I don't see much wind, and I am, as of right now, not going to factor any wind into the equation. So I'm going to get off of Windfinder. And while I make sure that I pull chat up, P, how you doing, man? I've been a while. Hope all is well. Hope you've had a good couple of weeks. Been following you on Twitter. Hopefully you're staying safe up there in Chicago with all the shenanigans that are going on up there. But glad you could join and chat like you always do. How was your Zurich? Did you participate in the Zurich? Did you have any outright wagers and whatnot? So it's good to see you in chat again. But while I was pulling up chat, I wanted to make sure that I gave the updated field information. I mentioned it in the intro that Daniel Berger has withdrawn, replacing him as Arjun Atwal. So as far as I know, Daniel Berger is the last withdrawal. So 3 names that have taken themselves out of the field: Charlie Hoffman, Christian Bezadenhout, and Daniel Berger, replaced by, apologies, let me get it here, replaced by Ben Crane, Fabian Gomez, and Arjun Atwal. So if you haven't seen those field changes, there they are. So with that out of the way, I'm going to bring up the Mexico Open tournament site. And just as a reminder, if you did not get a chance to catch the initial research show, make sure you go do that. We went hole by hole, covered what exactly the course looked like, the layout and whatnot. And that information came from here. This is the Mexico Open tournament site. Gave all the descriptions. Now we looked at the courses through Pro Visualizer, but there was quite a bit of difference in the Pro Visualizer versus the tournament site, as the course has went through some renovations to make it a PGA Tour sanctioned or legitimate course, I guess is the best way to put it. But the brief overview is the entire course is paspalum greens, fairways. It is a par 71 that measures to 7,456 yards, at least on the scorecard. There are 5 par 3s and 4 par 5s, so there's just an extra par 3 making it a par 71. The length on the course comes in the par 5s. There is a 585, a 613, and a 637 yard par 5 here at Vedanta. It is a Greg Norman design. This is going to play similarly to, I believe, the Puerto Rico Open, Cocoa Beach, and the Corrales Punta Cana. So I've made sure I brought up a lot of the stats from there, the leaderboards and whatnot. So with that, I think first I'm going to start with Microsoft Excel. And this will be a bit of a review from last night, but this is the kind of the course composition chart from Fantasy National, or at least a crude imitation of it. This is based on the tournament site. So you have the 5 aforementioned par 3s, 2 from 150 to 175, and then 1 each in the remaining buckets, increasing in distance. There is a long par 3, 228, 226, I believe, in length. And then in the par 4s, there is a legitimate drivable par 4, about 297 yards. Could be drivable with 3 woods, to be honest, with some of the players. Pure risk reward hole, water on the left, scoring opportunity if you find the green, yada yada yada. You have 2 short-ish par 4s from 400 to 450, 4 from 450 to 500, and 2 that are 500 plus. The longest in this category here is at 498. So really, I'm thinking of it more as 3 450 to 500 and 3 500 plus, but just due to the precise nature, 4 fall into this because of the range there. So long par fours, and then the par fives, a very short par five, the closing hole, the 18th, which is seemingly an eagle opportunity. And then you have the 585 yard par five, and then two beyond 600 yards. So there is a look at the course breakdown, course composition, and then this is purely from Pro Visualizer. The estimated proximities. Two of these three are from par fives, and they're pretty legitimate. I think the two 600-yard par fives will be true three-shotters. I really do. One is such a dog leg, and it's protected by a parota tree. I'm sure I'm butchering that, but it's protected by a tree that you can't go directly at the green, so you have to kind of go around it, and that increases the yardage of the hole and whatnot. And then the other in the 75 to 100 is the assumption that the players don't go for the green on the risk reward short par four. So two of these three, I would say, are pretty legitimate. It could be argued that one of these three can be taken out with the 297-yard par four. But there's a look at the estimated approach shot distribution. I see a lot of long irons coming in to these greens, 3 from 200 plus, 2 more from 175 to 200. So long course, long irons are going to be needed to succeed here. And while I am here in Microsoft Excel, so that will give you a decent idea of what some of the stats we're going to cover. But while I'm here in Microsoft Excel, to also look at maybe some statistics that will help us navigate through some of the unknown this week. I've highlighted here the two comparison courses, at least from 2022, or at least calendar year 2022, I should say, because there is another one in the fall. I didn't go back that far. Probably should have, but I got so much into the data that I ran out of time, to be honest. But this is from the Puerto Rico and the Corrales. We don't have any statistics like we won't get from Mexico, tee, approach, around the green, putting. But everything else we should have minus proximity. So these two courses, the driving distance was more important than the average tour event. Fairways, kind of hit and miss. Good drives were less important. Greens in regulation were less important. Sand saves barely above tour average in terms of importance. But we move along here. Eagles, birdies, bogeys. There's not much I'm going to focus on in this tab of Fantasy National. I just don't know how difficult this course is going to be. I can see a narrative where if the wind stays down and the course is fast and firm, people are going to be able to run their drives 350 yards, and the course doesn't play nearly as long as it says yardage wise. Conversely, I can see where if the wind picks up just a slight amount, or if it's some of these long holes are dead into the wind, this course is going to be extra long with all the water in play. It can be very difficult. So there's not much I'm going to focus on in terms of eagles and birdies and bogeys and whatnot. Difficulty, of course, I just don't have a good gauge of where that's going to be this week. So instead, I really, really scrutinized the par threes, the par fours, and the par fives. That is the data that we can comfortably gather from the Corrales, from the Puerto Rico. And this is such a strong comparison to those two courses, being Vedanta, being such a comparison to these two. we're really going to scrutinize this, and this will explain some of the stats that I look into tonight. First being the par threes are roughly average in terms of PGA Tour importance. Corrales a little bit more important. Puerto Rico not as, or a little bit less important than the average tour event. So kind of a wash there. But I want you to notice how when you start getting length here, especially the Corrales, becomes very, very, very important. The par threes, the long par threes are a half a shot more important at the Corrales. The long par threes are about, anywhere from a tenth to two tenths more important than the average tour event. So longer par threes matter here at Puerto Rico and at Corrales. Now, does that mean we're going to focus on a range of the par threes here at Vedanta? Probably not, especially since there is one in each of the long par three categories. 225 plus, there's one. 200 to 225, there's one. So don't want to put all the eggs in one basket, but you can see here that the par threes, especially long par threes, there is a narrative here from the two Caribbean events already played this year. But speaking more so, looking at these par fours, par four importance at both of these courses is mitigated in terms of relevance to the rest of the average PGA Tour event. But again, focus on when you start getting longer par fours. 400 to 450, both of them are above tour average. With Cocoa Beach, the 400 to 450 par fours are almost a half a shot more important. The 450 to 500 are a quarter of a shot more important. Now, for whatever reason, the Corrales is not important from the 450 to 500s, but it is from the 500 plus. So take that how you will. The real similarities come into the par fives. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to unhighlight, move this over, and then re-highlight for you also. There's Puerto Rico and there's Corrales. Okay, so the par fives, both of them more important to the average tour event. Puerto Rico being 3/10 more so. The short par fives, somewhat. But look here, par fives, 600 to 650 yards. Puerto Rico, a half a shot more important than the average tour event. Corrales, almost a half a shot more important than the average tour event. And the Vedanta this week has two par fives from 600 to 650, and the third is at 500, and there's another one, a third, at 585 yards that, for all intents and purposes, you can see a tee set up in a pin placement where that could reach to 600 yards. So, in looking into this data, scrutinizing it today, I really feel like the par fives, 600 to 650, are going to be one of the areas that we're going to want to focus on in terms of par five performance. How much weight do we want to put in it? That's arguable. But if we're going to look at par fives, we definitely want to look at this range of par fives heaviest. Not going to, ignore these other two by any means. I mean, there is a short par five here at Vedanta that is an eagle opportunity. The 585 still falls into this range here and will probably do so most of the time. But half of the par fives measure in this bucket, and another one can get there. So I really like the idea of focusing on the 600 to 650. And the more I looked at it today, with there being 4 from 450 to 500 and 2 at 500 plus, and again with one of these being at 498, it's almost a 3 and 3. I don't know if I'm going to do 500 plus, but the 450 to 500 seems fairly strong, and 500 plus, to be fair. I mean, the Cocoa Beach has no par fours that measure 500 plus, but the Corrales does, and it's more important than the average tour event. So it'll be interesting. So I feel very confident in the 600 to 650 par 5s. I'm kind of debating with myself on either one of these two, both, neither on the par 4s. And then I'm pretty darn confident that I'm not going to focus on any of the length of the par 3s, just par 3s in total. But fully acknowledging that the longer par 3s are going to take more precedence over the shorter ones here at Vedanta. But there's only one in each of these ranges. So I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket for one or two holes. So I wanted to bring that up, show you this this comparison course data sheet that I put together and update throughout the year. We don't get proximities from those two courses being international events. No shot link or whatnot. I'll have to scroll over for you all on that. We don't get proximities for those courses. That's why I went to Pro Visualizer. I'm pretty darn confident that we're going to be looking at 200 plus, 175 to 200 type approaches, and then combine that with what I'm seeing from the data that I gather in terms of the 600 to 650 par 5s and whatnot. Distance may be a factor since both of those courses distance is more important, but I think I'm going to summarize that a little bit, especially considering what I was focusing on last night in fairways. When you combine fairways and driving distance, the stat that I'm referring to. So wanted to bring that up for before Fantasy National, so it would make sense on what we are looking at. So speaking of Fantasy National, let's move on over there and do a fairly quick recap of the initial research from last night. With no past Palom data, there's not a lot we can do with the putting. I really, truly don't have any idea what the speed of the greens are. My guess is it's going to be Velcro to average. Most Caribbean courses are kept at that, but I really couldn't tell you. With no wind, they might have some leeway to make these greens firm and fast. With no past Palom data, putting data to be collected, not a lot we can do with the putting. So let's go ahead and just stick to a pure strokes gained total, overall performance, no filters here other than since the beginning of the calendar year. So since the beginning of the calendar year, the last 36 rounds, your top performers have been Jon Rahm, Chris Kirk, Gary Woodland, Russell Knox, Vaughn Taylor, Pat Perez, Brendan Todd, Matt Jones, Ryan Armour, and David Lingmerth. And this is a name to remember. Now it's going to be easy to write off here in the beginning because it's only 8 rounds. And that's very true. It's a very small sample size. It is the fact of where those 8 rounds come, where they've come, that gives me a little bit more credence to him being 10th than just saying small sample size. But there is a look at your top performers from the beginning of the calendar year. Let's go ahead and add long course to the long course filter to this. Your top performers, so a strokes gained total view, your top performers on long courses since the start of the calendar year. Those players are Jon Rahm, Matt Jones, Chad Ramey, Chris Kirk, Nate Lashley, Gary Woodland, Vaughn Taylor, Charles Howell III, Tommy Gainey, and Mark Hinsby. Again, a lot of small sample size issues here. Mark Hinsby, only 1 tournament. Tommy Gainey, 2 tournaments where he made the cut once and missed the cut once. Jon Rahm, number 1 player in the field this week by far. Chad Ramey makes a whole lot of sense. His win at the Corrales and a 5th at Puerto Rico. Yeah, that's a lot of comparison course success, or previous course success, if you will, since there's no prior history here at Vedanta, if you want to combine the Corrales and Puerto Rico to make the quote past performance at this course, Chad Ramey would be it. But there's a look at your top performers on long courses. And we'll remove that. We're going to keep at the calendar year. Let's look at strokes gained approach. It's my preferred statistic. Again, I just think it is the most indicative stat for long-term success. So your top strokes gained approach players since the start of the calendar year: Jon Rahm, Gary Woodland, Russell Knox, Adams Vincent, Tony Finau, Luke Donald, Austin Smotherman, Ryan Armour, Nick Taylor, and Cameron Tringali. So again, a lot more overlap here. Gary Woodland loves long courses. He's been playing a whole lot better lately. Jon Rahm, no explanation needed. Russell Knox has been ball striking it very well lately. Vincent the same. Finau. It's a little surprising to see Ryan Armour here, although it's only 16 rounds. What are these 16 rounds? So he did play the Corrales. I feel like he played that pretty well. I can't remember offhand, but I do have the leaderboards up from those two tournaments earlier in February and March. Puerto Rico being February, Corrales being March. I feel like he played the Corrales pretty well, but we'll double check that. There's the Puerto Rico. He missed the cut. Honda, he missed the cut. Sony and Pebble Beach. So it's a little surprising to see him 7th in strokes gained approach. All right. I harped on last night where I kept saying that it was long irons and fairways that seemed to be the most important. Fairways meaning, or mainly because there was a whole lot of water in play. If you got wayward with your drive, you were going to get penalized. Well, the more I thought about it, fairways are still important, but being a long course, you would think distance is going to matter too. Well, you put distance and fairways together, you get strokes gained off the tee. So, your top strokes gained off the tee players since the start of the calendar year: Jon Rahm, Chris Kirk, Sebastian Munoz, Hayden Buckley, JT Poston, Cameron Champ, Kevin Streelman, Nick Hardy, Aaron Wise, and Joseph Bramlett. And Trey Mullinax. So Bramlett and Mullinax tied for 10th. All right. Again, not a whole lot of surprise here. Jon Rahm, Chris Kirk, Chris Kirk 2nd and 11th. Second and off the tee, 11th in approach. So great ball striker. Munoz, the same, 3rd and 21st. Aaron Wise, to be fair, 9th and 34th. Joseph Bramlett, 10th and 18th. So very, very heavily leaning towards ball striking course. I am this week. Especially since I don't have much to do with putting. I don't know how much around the green is going to play. And if you're in chat, join me. Jump in there. What do you think? Do you think this is a ball striker's course? Do you think it's going to be long enough and challenging enough to where around the green play is going to have to be the be all end all? Would be curious to hear from you all. So that is a look at what I have been focusing on, at least in the kind of the main page here of Fantasy National today. Let's move on. I mentioned how there wasn't a lot I was going to do with eagles and birdies and bogeys and whatnot, just because I don't know how difficult the course is going to be. So let's move to fairways and greens. Fairways and greens. I mentioned we looked at off the tee, but let's go ahead and sort by fairways gained. I think it's going to be more important than distance, only because of the amount of water and trouble that you can get into. If there wasn't as much water as there is, if this was kind of like Phoenix, for example, in the sense that there was just more native area as opposed to penalty, then I would go distance. But I'm going to look at fairways mainly and then worry about distance. So your top 10 fairways gained players since the start of the calendar year. Brian Stewart, Ches Reavy, Brendan Todd, Austin Cook, Kevin Streelman, Tyler Duncan, Hayden Buckley, Russell Knox, Adam Long, and Abraham Answer. And Ryan Armour, excuse me. So Abraham Answer and Ryan Armour tied for 10th. Of those players, none of them are great at distance. Hayden Buckley is a little bit above field average. He is 52nd out of a total of 144. But everybody else in the top 10 in fairways is below field average in terms of distance. You have to come down to Emiliano Grillo, 13th in fairways, 37th in distance. You have John Rahm, 5th in distance, 15th in fairway, so he's the premium driver here with no surprise. There's David Lingmerth again. He's 18th in fairways. We do not have the distance from his events. I'm going to continue to save David Lingmerth's stats here a little bit. If you have, if you can guess the foreshadowing, you probably know what these 8 events are, or 8 rounds are. But put it in the comments or put it in chat. What do you think before the reveal? What do you think these 8 rounds are? So there is a look at the distance in fairways. If we want to take a look at greens in regulation, let's take a look at greens and add the over 7,400 yard filter. So your top green and regulation game players on long courses since the start of the calendar year. Those players are Alex Smalley, John Rahm, Aaron Rai, Charles Howell III, Nate Lashley, Tony Finau, David Lingmerth, Nick Taylor, Bryce Garnett, and Hank Lebioda. Okay. Some of these names I know from researching today, and I've put a spreadsheet together for you all here at the end of the show. But, you know, John Rahm makes a whole lot of sense. Alex Smalley is surprisingly one of the names here. He did play the Corrales extremely well. The Arnold Palmer, he made the cut in all, he made the cut at the API, a very difficult tournament, a very long course. He hit, he was above field average in greens that week. The Farmers, the same, a long course. 8 rounds is normally 4 tournaments worth of play from Lingworth. You are correct in your analysis usually, P. I will give you that, but this is only 2 tournaments. But I will not disagree with your initial reaction, because that would have been my initial reaction too. So there's a look at greens and regulation on long courses. Again, there's just not a lot I think I want to focus on here. If I thought it was going to be fairways, I would focus on that, but the more I thought about it, I kept harping on fairways last night in the initial research show, but this course is long. I think distance is going to matter. If I think distance and fairways are going to matter, I'm just going to use off the tee. Greens and regulation, probably going to be important, but I'm just going to use strokes gain approach until we get some data. Get some data on this course if the course if this event comes back next year. I did see where I believe the average green size is about 5,600 square feet, so slightly below tour average. I think I saw that somewhere, but don't quote me on that. Like I said, I've done a lot of research, and for whatever reason that number kind of stuck out. So maybe 5,600, maybe that sounds right. Knowing my luck, it's like 8,600, and I just threw you all way off. So that's going to be it for this tab. I am going to go to proximity. Tons of bunkers out there, see? So you say that, and when we went through Pro Visualizer, it looked like bunkers. But according to the tournament site, there are only 55 bunkers on the course. So what I'm thinking is that there's only 55 defined bunkers where players can't ground their club. There appears to be a whole lot of native area, a whole lot of desert combined with some waste area that is looking like it would be sand. But, and again, I can only go by the tournament site. I've never played the course. There are only 55 bunkers according to the tournament site. So I imagine it's a whole lot of desert area coming into play there. Let's see, what else here? Yeah, I was trying to see if they mentioned the green sizes here. They did not. In the proximity tab here, I think it's pretty clear that I think it's going to be a long iron type of approach this week, long course. Again, this all will depend on the run out too. If the course is fast and firm, guys might be able to get it into the 150, 175, 200 range. And this is just full disclosure, full transparency on my end. I do not know how paspalum affects rollout, if the ball tends to grab in the paspalum, or if paspalum will allow the ball to run out further. I don't know that. So if you know, by all means put it in chat, put it in the comments if you're not watching live. But I don't want to say something and then be wrong, so I'm just going to admit my ignorance to it. I would rather do that than tell you all wrong. So with that, I really think it's going to be a long iron preferred or mandated approach shot course. So what we did last night, I sorted on the 200 plus, and we'll mention some of the guys that are good from 200 plus and the 175 to 200. But your top 200 plus approach shot players in terms of proximity. Those players are Aaron Rye, Austin Smotherman, Tony Finau, Seth Reeves, Taylor Moore, John Rahm, Gary Woodland, Danny Lee, Tyler Duncan, and Michael Gligic. The players that are good in that, those same 10 players, Rye, Smotherman, Finau, Reeves, Moore, Rahm, Woodland, Lee, Duncan, Gligic. Those same players that are also good from 175 to 200. Austin Smotherman is 7th from 175 to 200 and 2nd in 200 plus. You got Taylor Moore, 19th and 5th. John Rahm, 11th and 6th. You come down a little bit here. You got Cameron Champ, 16th in 175 to 200 proximity and 12th in 200 plus proximity. And then one final note here, Nate Lashley, 5th in 175 to 200, 16th in 200 plus. To be fair, Nate Lashley is seemingly very good in all of the proximities, at least in terms of the field. So maybe a name to keep an eye on for DFS. Let's see. If you think it's going to be a true 3-shot par 5 type course, and guys don't go for that green, or don't try to drive the drivable par 4 green. So let's take a look at some of the short wedge proximities, just in case that ends up being the proximity. Again, I don't think it will be, but there is a scenario where it is. So your top performers, or your top players in terms of proximity from approach shots from 75 to 100 yards. Those players are Dylan Wu, Brendan Todd, Jared Wolfe, Chris Kirk, Andrew Novak, Matt Jones, Joseph Bramlett, Kevin Chappell, Austin Cook, Tony Finau, and Satoshi Kodaira. So just trying to get a gauge here of some of these players. So you have Jared Wolfe, 3rd in the wedges in terms of proximity, 1st in 175 to 200, but very poor from 200 plus. You have got, let's see, somebody like Kevin Chappell. He is 8th in wedges. He's 16th in 200 plus, but he is very poor from 175 to 200. Same goes for Tony Finau. Good at the wedges, very good at 200 plus, pretty darn mediocre. He's not as bad as Kevin Chappell or who was I talking about earlier? Who was it? He's not as bad as, say, Jared Wolf from the 200. Tony Finau is pretty mediocre, certainly on the negative end, but much more middling in terms of the 175 to 200. To find a player that is good at all three is the aforementioned Nate Lashley. 14th in wedges, 5th from 175 to 200, and 16th from 200 plus. He's the first guy that is pretty darn solid at all three of the possible proximities, or at least possible in my mind, proximities. So there's a name to star or keep a pulse on when you're building some lineups. So there is a look at the proximities. Let's go into the par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Your top performers on par 3s, make sure I don't have any filters up. Yep. So your top performers on par 3s since the start of the calendar year: Brian Stewart, Luke Donald, Jared Wolf, Grayson Sigg, Scott Stallings, Brendan Todd, Justin Lauer, Abraham Ancer, Graham McDowell, and Grayson Murray. Of the players here, I'm not going to resort it, but of the players here that are good at total par 3s and long par 3s, you've got Brian Stewart, first, second in 200 to 225, and 6th in 225 plus. So first, second, 6th. Let's see. Luke Donald, arguably, 2nd, 12th, and 35th. Brendan Todd, 6th, 2nd, and 37th. Let's see. So a lot of these guys are good in 2 and maybe poor to middling in a 3rd. You got to come down here to Alex Smalley, 20th in total, 16th from 200 to 225, and 7th at 225 plus. So there's another par 3 player to keep an eye on. Cameron Tringali is top 30 in all 3. C.T. Pan, 30th, 6th, and 35th, so almost top 30 in all 3. Chris Kirk, 10th in 200 to 225, 12th in 225 plus, 34th on all par 3s. So decent stuff there. Again, I'm not going to go too much heavily into the specific ranges of par 3s. So that's it for par 3s. Let's go to par 4s. Par 4s. Again, I'm going to sort on just total performance on par 4s. Your best performers on par 4s since the start of the calendar year: John Rahm, Ryan Armour, Gary Woodland, Chris Kirk, Matt Jones, Adam Long, Chase Seifert, Nate Lashley, Patrick Flavin, and Kiradak Aphibarnrat. Of the players just listed, those who are good from 450 to 500 and especially 500 plus, you've got John Rahm, first, and 13th. Matt Jones, 4th in total par 4s, 31st from 450 to 500, but 10th in the 500 plus. Charles Howell III, 13th, 16th, and 4th. Let's see. Okay, David Lingmerth again, 18th, 3rd, and 13th. So Lingmerth has been popping quite a bit here. Charles Howell III has come up a couple of times. Of course, John Rahm, no surprise. Chris Kirk has been up there quite a bit. Lashley has been there with all the proximities. Now in the par 4s. I think I'm going to focus more on the 500 plus than the 450 to 500. Even though there are 4 technically in the 450 to 500 and only 2 in the 500 plus. I think I'm still going to lean more towards the 500 plus, but I'm curious to hear you all. What do you all think? Jump in chat, put it in the comments. Is there a length of par 4 of, if any, that you're going to focus on? Par 3s, par 5s the same. Do you think this is going to do you think the par 4s are the most scoreable holes? Either the par 3s, par 5s? Let me know your thoughts. I certainly have mine. You'll see how those turn out tomorrow in the reveal of the mixed condition model, but really curious to hear your all's take. Let's see. I think that's going to probably do it for the par 4s. Again, I mean, there's just not a lot to go on here with this new tournament. No architect. The wind, I mean, we could do calm, but I don't really feel great about adding the calm wind filter. So let's move to par 5s, and I'm definitely going to go par 5s and 600 to 650. So your top performers on par 5s since the start of the calendar year. You got Vince Whaley, Gary Woodland, Chris Kirk, Robert Garrigus, Pat Perez, John Rahm, Aaron Rai, Brandon Hagee, Robert Streb, and Jason Duffner. Those players who are good at both total par 5s and the 600 to 650. You've got Robert Garrigus, 2nd and 9th. 9th being the 600 to 650. Surprisingly, John Rahm is not good at the very long par 5s. He's only 54th, good in relation to the field. You've got Aaron Rai, 6th in total par 5s, 16th in long par 5s. Brandon Hagee, 8th and 25th. Cameron Champ, 11th and 12th. Austin Smotherman, 11th and 13th. Sahith Theegala, 15th and 7th. One more here, kind of an honorable mention, I guess. Kramer Hickok, 20th in total par 5s, 11th on long par 5s. So that is going to do it for the Fantasy National portion. I mentioned that I had brought up the 2 leaderboards. We can come back to that if we so want to. If there are any questions from chat that they want to see some specific stuff. But I kind of try to incorporate some of the leaderboards into a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. So let me bring up the Excel focus again one more time. I think this will probably be the last time I switch focus. So what you have here, these are the players that are in the field this week, and I can turn off the color code if it's hard to see. But these are the players that are in the field this week, plus their salary up here in the far right. These are the players that have played either the Puerto Rico or the Corrales, or both, and their average finish at them. So, for example, the highest average finish, or best average finish, I should say, is Alex Smalley. He finished 2nd at the Corrales, but he did not play the Puerto Rico. So I do not put him nearly as, I don't want to say valuable, but I would put Chad Ramey higher in my rankings based solely on this because he played both the Puerto Rico and the Corrales, and top 5 both, including a win at the Corrales. So even though his average finish is a little lower than Alex Smalley, the fact that he played both, and he played both very, very well, Chad Ramey at least has had success on similar style courses to Vedanta, and very recently too. And full disclosure, like I only went 2022. That's a very small sample size. It would be prudent to do 2021 or 2020 to add on to that, just to give you a much more stable set of data. Again, I just got into looking at data and realized I needed to try to put something together so I'll probably expand on this a little bit tomorrow in my own time, but I did want to at least bring something over for you all to take a look at. So, again, Chad Ramey, top 5, both Caribbean events this calendar year, including a win. Nate Lashley, 7th and 15th for an average of 11th place finish. Brian Stewart averaged a top 15 in both events. Brandon Wu, top 15. Vaughn Taylor, Andrew Novak, Ben Coles, Justin Lauer. The reason I've been saving David Lingmerth, those 8 rounds were the Puerto Rico and the Corrales. As P jokingly said earlier, and even though it was a joke, it's true 95% of the time. David Lingmerth played both of those events pretty darn well. Now, you wouldn't say 44th is generally played well, but when you combine it with the fact that he top 20'd the Puerto Rico, actually, let me freeze these panes so I don't mix them up. Oh, gosh dang it. What did I do? Unfreeze panes. I want to freeze the top row. There we go. So David Lingmerth, 16th at the Puerto Rico Open. He did middling finish, tied for 44th at the Corrales, but he still averaged a top 30. And look at the salary. He is almost near minimum. Now, am I advocating you throw in David Lingmerth in every single lineup? No, I am not doing that at all. But he has played the 2 comparison courses very well in the past couple of months. And he's played them well, and he popped on a whole lot of those metrics, including the long par 4s, the par 5s. I believe he might have been up there on one of the proximities as well. So just take a look at David Lingmerth. But anyway, any person that is highlighted played in both events. And of course, yellow being, they had good success in both. Orange being that they had middling success, at least in terms of average. Maybe, somebody like Lingmerth, 16th and 44th. You have Bryce Garnett, who finished top 10 at Puerto Rico, but, 58th at Corrales, ended in a middling-ish average. And then you have the players down here who played in both and either did extremely well in one, like Ricky Barnes, 22nd, and then horrible in the other, or were, kind of middling to clunker in both, say someone like Brett Jewett and Kelly Craft, 50th and 75th. And again, if that color coding is hard to see, I would be more than happy to take it off. I just wanted to bring something over to show you all, to at least make it clean and give you some semblance of a prior course performance. And even though this isn't specifically at Vedanta, it is pretty darn close, I would say, in terms of comparison courses. Puerto Rico, Corrales both have Paspalum greens. They're both over 7,400 yards. The difference being Puerto Rico and Corrales generally get a lot of wind, and there is not a lot of wind in the forecast for the Mexico Open this week. But that is going to be it for what I have for you all in the Data Dive show. I actually got through that a little bit quicker than I thought I would, so I can hang out for a couple minutes, answer any questions that you all have. I'll pose a couple of questions out there. I've mentioned, what stats do you think are going to play? Do you think it's going to be par 3s, par 4s, par 5s? What's the length of the par 4, if any? Do you think this is going to be a long ball strikers course, or do you think this is going to be a wedge fest? Another question that I have, of all the Mexican-born players that are not well known, so basically not Abraham Ancer and not Carlos Ortiz, do you have any information on them? What have other pundits been saying? That is something that I don't know, and I don't think I tell everyone that watches every DFS Tactics show, you have to choose what you lose to. And when somebody doesn't have any data, I'll just choose to lose to them if I can't interpret it. Bombers course. Yeah, you and I are on the same wavelength here, P. I think this is going to be maybe not bomb off the tee, but certainly a long iron focused tournament. Certainly, guys like Gary Woodland and John Rahm, I think, would have the advantage since they can hit enough fairways and be long. Let's see. Someone else to kind of think about here, Brandon Wu. Top 30 both events, including a top 5 at the Puerto Rico in February. He is in the low 7s. Everyone knows my favorite 6K play, seemingly, Brian Stewart. Now he's 7,300, so he's not a 6K play this week, so I can't take that credit, but he generally plays these style events well. Justin Lauer, coming off a pretty darn good performance at the Zurich. Can't remember who his partner was, but I know they at least made the cut. Somebody else I'm pretty high on, Tagala. I know a lot of people are high on Tagala, but even though he didn't play the Puerto Rico, 22nd at Corrales, this seems like it would be a fit for his game, his style of game. David Lipsky coming off a very good, him and I think it was him and Aaron Rye, wasn't it? Those two played really well at the Zurich, so both of them should have a whole lot of confidence. Peter Uihlein has made some cuts lately and can bomb it. Okay, let's see. Where is Peter Uihlein on here? Might have to take off the color coding. Let me do that here. No fill and filter. I want Peter Uihlein. Let's see what he has done, at least at these two courses. Okay, yeah, 2 top 40s. I would say they were, to be fair, they're probably middling finishes, but by no means awful. At 7,000, okay, he at least has the comparison course stuff working for him. I'll switch over to Fantasy National here real quick. Let's see if we can find, let me go to just flat out strokes gained. Let me search for Uihlein. Let's see. What's he been doing lately? Well, it's not supposed to be windy, so that's a bonus right there in of itself. Of course, we don't have any paspalum. Again, I don't know how much easy versus average versus difficult. I'm just not even going to attempt to make a guess. So, Valero was a made cut and a poor one to be. He didn't gain strokes in any of the main stats, and yet made the cut. So that's saying something. Let's see. Sorry, I'm bringing up chat again. Seems like he would do well on a Clown Resort course. And then the two aforementioned Caribbean events, the Honda. Yeah, he's made 4 straight cuts. Okay, I can see dabbling a little bit in Peter Uihlein for DFS maybe. Now the Farmers is a long course. He actually played it well and didn't make the cut. Houston is a long course, played it okay. We don't know the specifics of the data. I would imagine that the putting would have to have been somewhat close to field average here. The irons have been good. That's a good thing. That's promising, especially then he gains 3.5 at the Honda. Okay, all right. For a Clown Resort course, maybe sure. I can get there with that. Let's see, other Clown Resort course players perhaps. Let's see. Maybe I don't know, Andrew Putnam, Mark Hubbard. what's Mark Hubbard done? He missed the cut at the Corrales. He was one of the favorites. Puerto Rico, he played well. What's Mark Hubbard done? I'm sorry, it's gonna be a skewed view. I'm just gonna change it for you all so you all don't get angry at me. Let's see, Mark Hubbard. What has he done? Filter. Mark Hubbard. I just passed him. 38th and 66. So the same finish as Peter Uline at the Puerto Rico, and then missed the cut at the Corrales. Or if you made the cut, it was a clunker of a weekend. So not exactly the best. So I think that's going to do it. We've run over a couple of minutes, but hopefully I've given you some ideas here leading into your lineup construction or some outright wager thoughts for the week. P, great to see you again. It's been a little while. Glad you could join. Thanks for jumping in chat like you always do. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I really appreciate the support. For all of the wagers that you've already made at the Mexico Open this week, for all the wagers you're thinking about making for the Mexico Open this week, and until I see you tomorrow night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.